Chapter 3. Dog Mischief. After tugging once more on the bedroom door, Mr. Hollister decided to do something else. He suspected the children had locked it, but what were they up to? He put on his trousers and shirt. Then he opened the screen of one window and stepped out onto the sloping roof over the porch. Suddenly he smelled bacon frying. Grinning, he stuck his head back through the window and said to his wife, "Don't be alarmed, dear. I have a very good idea of what's going on. I'll be right back." Reaching the edge of the roof, Mr. Hollister dangled his legs over it and felt for the post. Then he shinnied down and landed unharmed on the ground. Taking a front door key from his pocket, he let himself into the house and stepped as quietly as a cat to the closed kitchen door. He looked through the crack. The children were busy preparing breakfast. Their father turned, hurried upstairs, and unlocked the bedroom door. "Are the children all right?" Mrs. Hollister asked quickly. "Happy as larks," he reported. "They're down in the kitchen making a surprise breakfast. Come on, we'll play a joke too." "How?" "Disguise ourselves and walk in on them." Mrs. Hollister chuckled and went for 2 old masquerade costumes from a hall closet. She put on a Spanish dress and dark glasses and covered her hair with a scarf. Her husband wore a black suit with a high hat and a mustache and beard. "They'll never recognize us," Mr. Hollister laughed. "Come on, follow me to the front door." The two went around the house to the kitchen door and knocked. Holly opened it. "Ahem, ahem," the masquerading daddy began. "Do Mr. and Mrs. Hollister reside here?" "Yes, they do," replied Holly, staring at the strange-looking couple. "But they're still in their room." "Would you call them, please? We must see them at once." The other children came to look at the callers as Holly disappeared upstairs. A moment later, she came running back. "They're not here!" she exclaimed. "What?" said Pete. "Where did they go?" "Oh, goodness, I don't know. I locked them in," Holly declared. "You did you?" Mr. Hollister said in his natural voice, and both parents whipped off their disguises. The children's eyes opened wide. "Daddy! Mommy!" they shouted. "You fooled us!" Then Holly added, "I didn't mean to scare you, locking you in. We just wanted to surprise you with breakfast to make up for the pillow fight." "Well, you did," Mrs. Hollister said, smiling. "And everything smells so good. I'll get Sue. Then let's eat." When they finished, Mr. Hollister declared he had never eaten a better meal. "How about surprising us every Sunday?" he said. "Only you won't have to lock us in. We'll wait to be called for breakfast." After they had been to church and eaten dinner, the children sat down to look at storybooks when the telephone rang. It was a telegraph message from Juan Deere, which Mr. Hollister jotted down and then read to his family. The Indian was asking $1,000 for the stock of the chaparral. "That sounds like a real bargain," Mr. Hollister replied. "I think that when Tinker gets back to the store, I'll go out there and look it over. Maybe Indy will come and help Tinker." "Let's ask him, please," Pam urged. This time, the whole family went in the station wagon to meet the nice Yumatán. They found him clipping his front hedge. He put down the shears and walked over to the car. Mr. Hollister introduced his wife, Ricky, Holly, and Sue, then said he had heard from Juan Deere. "I'm going to wire him to hold the stock until I can get out there and look at it," Mr. Hollister explained. "Right now, my head man is just recovering from an illness. Indy, would it be possible for you to work at the trading post while I take my family out to Yumatán country?" "I'd like nothing better, Mr. Hollister," the ex-ball player replied with a grin. "When would you want me to start?" "You'd better come tomorrow so I can show you where things are." "Thank you, I'll be there early," Indy said. "But I'll have to take Wednesday off. I promised to have a booth at the Grove County Fair with Indian things in it." "You mean you're going to have a booth full of Indians?" Sue piped up. Everyone laughed, and Indy said, "No, just all sorts of articles made by the Yumatans. Juan Deere wrote that he sent a large box of things to me. Only it'll be addressed to Edward Rhodes. That's my real name. I expect it to arrive tomorrow." "What are they going to have at the fair?" Pete asked. "All kinds of amusements," Indy answered. "Maybe you'd all like to come, even though it's pretty far from here." "Yikes!" Ricky shouted. "I want to ride on the Ferris wheel." "And I want a merry-go-round ride," Sue said. Mrs. Hollister smiled and said she would drive the children over to the fair on Wednesday. In the meantime, they would get ready to go to New Mexico, and Indy would learn about the trading post. By Tuesday noon, the children's suitcases were partly packed, and when their father came home to lunch, they began asking if he had decided when they would leave. "I'm waiting now to hear from the airline office," he said. "We'll fly most of the way." "That's super," Pete cried, his eyes shining with excitement. "We've never been on a plane," Holly said. "Are we going to sleep in it?" "Perhaps." After that, all the children seemed to be talking at once. Finally, when it was time for dessert, Mrs. Hollister asked Pam to go out to the back porch and bring in a lemon meringue pie she had left there to cool. Her daughter rose from the table and went out. But a moment later, the others heard a startled cry. "It's gone! Most of the pie's gone!" Everyone rushed to the porch and gazed in dismay. Nothing was left but the crust. "Oh dear," Mrs. Hollister exclaimed. "Who did that?" At first, no one could even guess. Then Ricky said he had seen Zip sniffing near the table. "My dog wouldn't have such bad manners as to steal pie," Pam said loyally. "I'm afraid," Mr. Hollister answered, "that when it comes to food as delicious as Mother's pies, a dog would forget his manners." "Let's find Zip," Ricky proposed. The children saw the collie lying in the shade of a willow tree near the lake shore. He rose lazily to his feet and walked over to them. "Did you eat our pie?" Holly asked him, shaking a finger at Zip. "Oh, you did," Pam cried out. "I can see some of it on the end of your nose." Sure enough, on the tip of the dog's black nose was some meringue. As Zip hung his head, Pete could not help making a wisecrack. "You're not a collie, Zip," he said. "You're just a little old lemon meringue hound." "You'll have to come in and apologize to Mother," Sue scolded the dog. They led Zip into the house and told her he was guilty. "Well," she said, "the only punishment I can think of for Zip is to make him eat the rest of the pie and not get any dog food." "Wow," Ricky burst out. "What a swell punishment." Mrs. Hollister gave each of the children an apple for dessert. As they were munching them, they heard the telephone ring. Pete answered. "This is Indy Rhodes," the caller said. "Is your dad there? I thought maybe he could help me out." "He's gone back to the store," Pete replied. "Can we help you?" "I guess not, thank you. That shipment from Juan Deere hasn't arrived. I just called the express company and the post office, but it hasn't come to Shoreham, and tomorrow will be too late. I'm afraid it's lost." "Golly, that's too bad, Indy," Pete replied. "I sure hope you find it." After he hung up, Pete told Pam the bad news. "I wish we could help, Indy," Pam said. They went outside and sat down on the front porch steps. Presently, Mr. Barnes, the mailman, arrived. As he held out a children's magazine to them, Pam suddenly had an idea. "Mr. Barnes," she asked, "how do you find packages that get lost in the mail?" "There are several ways," he replied. "Sometimes a package goes to a wrong town because of a faulty address. Why, did you lose something?" Pam told him briefly about Indy Rhodes and the missing package of Yumatan articles. "Indy Rhodes, eh?" Mr. Barnes repeated the name slowly. He looked up at the sky, thinking hard. Then he said, "There's a street called Indian Road in West Shore across the lake. Perhaps the package went to someone there by mistake." "That's a neat clue," Pete said. "I wish we could go over there and find out. Could you help us, Mr. Barnes?" The mailman said he would be glad to. I'll tell you what, he said. When I finish my deliveries at 4 o'clock, I'll drive back here in my own car and take you to West Shore. That's wonderful, Pam said delightedly. We'll tell Mother. At 10 minutes past 4, she and Pete were waiting when Mr. Barnes drove up. Hop in, he smiled, opening the door. Half an hour later, they arrived in West Shore. I think Indian Road is up this way, he said, making a turn. Yes, I see the signpost. And we're lucky, he chuckled. There are only 4 houses on one side of the street and 6 on the other. It won't take us long to find out if any of these people received Indy's package. They divided the work, each taking 3, but met in front of the last house without any success. Pam sighed and whispered to Pete, Do you suppose our clue isn't any good after all? We'll try this last house, Pete said, starting up the front walk. Pam followed. When her brother rang the bell, a boy appeared and opened the screen door. Did you get a big box by mistake? The girl asked. Why do you want to know? The boy asked flippantly. Pete and Pam had glanced inside the hall. Near the door stood a large carton. Pete read the sender's name printed in the upper left-hand corner. The Chaparral. I believe that's the package we're looking for, Pete declared, stepping forward. No, it isn't. It doesn't belong to you, the boy shouted. He slammed the screen door and locked it.